So carrying on from yesterday, the code isn't exactly the same, sorry, because I haven't reproduced Ricardo's code, but I've got some code that is quite similar. So it'll be a good test of your knowledge anyway to see what you picked up and see what still needs a bit more clarity. So yesterday you just worked on setting up a basic node server and also using fetch to make a GET request to fetch some data that was stored in a file on the back end. So I've still got my server file. Ignore the database bit for now if you could. So this should look fairly similar, the first few lines, right? You required express because it's an extra dependency that we use to make our back-end routes a bit easier to manage and a bit easier to write. So that we can just do things like app.get, app.post. So it wouldn't quite be that simple if we were just using Node on its own. But Express gives us that opportunity. So that's why we've assigned app to the invocation of the Express framework. Yeah, that's how we can use app.get, app.post, and etc. App.use just means, I don't know if you had an app.use yesterday, did you? App.use, does that make any sense? No, didn't see that yesterday. So that's essentially just saying that for the relevant requests, we're going to use an extra bit of middleware or something that can modify the request or the response. That's all a bit of middleware is. It has access to the request and the response, so the incoming or outcoming traffic, incoming and outcoming data that's going to or from our server. And in this case, it just makes sure that we can easily deal with JSON data. That's what this one's there for. So you did have something like a get route that was set up to be some user data. So I've set up a similar one here. At the moment it's doing a database collection, but we're going to modify that in a second so that we're not going to use the database, we're going to use just the way Ricardo did yesterday. But I just want to recap, so hopefully you'll be able to help me write that one, help me rewrite that one. And then we're going to go on to look at writing a post request. So for a database, that would be something like inserting that record into a database. But in this case, we're just going to insert it into our user data, which is stored somewhere else. Right, so you would have also had something like this. You would have had a file whereby, so this is a front-end file now, we're back on the front end. A front-end file where you were setting some state to store your users. Initially you might have just made that an empty string or an empty array, and then you made a fetch request to your backend to retrieve that data. I want to show you just one other place, one other endpoint that we could use, and rather than using our own backend server, we might just go to a web address somewhere on the web that has been set up to serve anyone who makes a request there some data. Now, I think Ricardo mentioned that we can't just access any old data on the web, right? We can't just go to Google or Amazon and get all their accounts and stuff like that just for a fetch request for obvious reasons. However, some websites have made part of their data available. So think about Spotify as well. So Spotify can make track lists and user data and song titles, artist details, stuff like that available via its API. Twitter can do a similar thing, right? If you have a Twitter handle, then you can request the tweets via the Twitter API for that particular handle. So I'm just using a free API here. It's called JSON Placeholder, and all it does is it's a website that if I went there, it would return some JSON data. So if I went to that website now, you can see that it's got some JSON data here. Yeah, all looks very nice. So I'm using JSON formatter as well. If yours doesn't look like that, it might all be in one column, whereas JSON formatter nests it and makes it so that we can collapse it and expand it and things. So that's just an extension up here. I can't remember which one it is. That's not that one. I don't know. It's one of the extensions up here. No. Okay. So what I wanted to show is that rather than doing it to your backend API, we could just make a GET request to this web address as well. And if that is set up to return something, then that endpoint will return that data. Okay. So this fetch request should look very similar to before. We've just done a fetch request. There's our endpoint, or our URI, or URL. Then we're converting it into JSON, and then setting it in the state. So if we did want to display that via our app, we could do that. And then you had this sort of example yesterday as well. This has just got a little bit more code because the data's got a few more properties there. So I was mapping over each user and just rendering their name, username, and email onto the screen. So first, let's just get that up and running. What sort of script do I need for this? Ricardo spoke about changing your scripts. In what file did I change the scripts? Package.json, yeah. So if I scroll up, there should already be some necessary ones here, but different developers will call these different things, so it's worth just checking here. So I've done a start front end, a start back end, and a start all. So just to make the fetch request to a third-party API, we technically don't need a backend. So I could just run the front end to get it running. But I'm going to try just starting everything up anyway. So I'll type npm run start all. And we have task not found start. Did I put a space in there? Npm run start all. That's interesting. Clearly seems like it's there. Oh, the start's not found. Yeah. So that's. Yeah. So that should be start front end. Absolutely. Okay, let's try that again. Oh, so I've got an error somewhere else in my file. Set users. Set error. Set users. Set error. It's not defined. No, they're defined there, aren't they? It's a bit weird. Not sure about that one. It was working earlier. Changed it as far as I'm aware. Just run the front end for now and just see whether that makes any difference. It shouldn't do, right? It's just front end code. Same issue. That was the one earlier. It should look like that, but let's fix it if we can. Set users is there. Was that a suggestion online? No?
I was going to say that maybe put ERR instead of error.
ER instead of error? No, because that's just locally defined here. I mean, that shouldn't make a difference at all. Let's change these to be... change the name of them. Is that because it's in a different function down? It might be that one down there in another function. Yeah, that's probably what it is. Let me comment that out for later, because that's what we're going to be using later. And I'll put that back. Set users is still not defined. On line 13. Okay, I think we're good to go. Right, sorry about that. So now on the local host, if you refresh, then it's managed to pull our user data. And this is not coming from our own application, right? This is hosted on a server, God knows where, right? It could be America, it could be, I don't know where JSON placeholder keep their servers, but the point is that the data that we're fetching doesn't have to be on a server on our own, in our own application or on our own domain. It could be anywhere in the world as long as the provider has set it up so that we can make requests there and get some data back. Cool. So now that we've got that displaying, how about this is just some of the data from it that I've stored on the back end. So just as a recap, how would I get this data displaying in my app instead? So I don't want to use this endpoint anymore. I want to set up an endpoint on my back end to serve the data. Can you remember what you discussed yesterday? So let's have a look at the server. Yep, so let's say we wanted to use that endpoint, REST get user data. So what would I have to do on the front end? So I changed my endpoint in my fetch request to be the same thing, right? So rather than a web address now, it's a relative address, REST get user data. I think that's the same, right? Cool. So then what? So I've changed my endpoint. If we go back into the server, it's not sending anything at the moment. How would I get that data in there? It's currently stored in user data. Can I use an import? Can't use an import, right? Unless it's the really up-to-date version of Node. So what syntax do I have to use instead, rather than ES6 modules? The require syntax, the common JS syntax, yep. So can we call it user data? And set it to require, and put my path in here. So it's very similar to the import-export syntax, but we've got to remember the differences, yeah? So my path, if we have a look, it's just there, so it's in the same folder, and it's called user data. However, that won't be required yet, because there's no export, or there's no, it's not just export, it's called something different. Module.exports, does it still go there in front of the function? Can I do that? Yeah, module.exports. Put an equals, like that?
Yeah, like that.
Yep, okay, good. So that's been exported, that has been imported into the server. So when someone makes a request to this endpoint, a GET request to this endpoint, what do I want to do, or what do I want to send? Show? What do you mean show? Res.show? What do you mean?
No.
So we've got some user data. I don't think there's anything about shows, but... So what is user data? Is it an array?
Yeah, it's array.
Is it an array?
Array of object.
User data. What is user data? User data is a function, yeah, that returns an array of objects. So what do I need to do? Invoke the function. We've imported the function, right? We've imported it there, and it's assigned to a constant called user data. But we need to invoke the function and then send back the result of that function. I think something wrong with the brackets here, so we've got that one. That's it, right? We don't need the next bit. Okay. Anything else, or shall we test that? Or how would we test that our data is actually getting across? If I go back to the browser, so at the moment, we've got a proxy error. Could not proxy request blah 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 from blah 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 blah. Why is that? What else did... Oh, we have got one. I was going to say, what else did Ricardo say we needed? So we have got a proxy. Interesting. Why is it not liking that? Let's just see what happens if we directly go to the endpoint. On 3001, isn't it? Site can't be reached. It almost looks like my back-end server's just not running for some reason. Oh, did we not actually run it in the end when I tried to... Yeah, I just started the front end in the end, didn't I? Okay, yep. So if we start both servers, we should now get the result. Okay, cool. So that data's coming across. So yeah, if you just run your application, you should be able to tell whether it's coming across. But if you needed some more information, where would I go? DevTools network. Yeah, that's your friend when dealing with fetch requests. So you open up the DevTools, you click on the network tab, and then we can inspect what comes across when I refresh the page. So it's failing to get the favicon. I probably deleted it and then forgot to remove a reference to it. But we can clearly see that in our response, we've got our array here containing our data from the back end. Nice. So now we want to take this a step further. And rather than just retrieving data, we want to be able to add to this array by posting something from the front end. And let's say creating a fifth item in the array. So to do that, we have to do something a little bit different. It's still a fetch request. So we come back onto our front end, and I've partially started doing it. So this time, I'm just going to put a brand new function, a nested function if you like, inside of my users function. And this is going to be to post, let's call it just post single user, yeah? So I've just created some mock user data. So it's got an ID, a name, a username, and an email. And then you could test out your post request using that URL if you wanted. However, we're just going to send it straight to our backend. So what route could I use? Doesn't really matter, but REST, give me a nice name. Store user, I like that. Yeah, that's good. Okay. So most other things stay the same, except we won't, well, yeah, actually we will be invoking set users because we'll get the updated users back. But I've started to create here what we call some options. And fetch can actually take a second argument. And inside of there, we can put some options. So this second argument is an object. So I've begun to create an options object here. And one of the most crucial bits here, especially if we're doing a post request or any other request that is not a GET request, is we need to set a method key. So what HTTP request method are we going to use?
Post.
Previously we've been using GET. Notice the capitals. This time we want to use post. And these options must be strings. There's a couple other things we need. We tend to, when working with JSON data, pass it as a string. So by pass I mean convert it to a string or read it as a string. And when we send it to our backend, we want it to go as a string, not just as a raw JavaScript object. Does anyone know the method in JavaScript to convert an object to a string?
String.
It's to convert JSON specifically, a JavaScript object to convert JSON to a string. So it's JSON dot, no one heard of it? Stringify? Okay. So there's this method that can convert a JavaScript object into a stringified object. So a string that contains an object inside, if you like. And this is a very common format for sending data across networks. A stringified JSON object. So we just pass in the object that we want to stringify. In our case, this is new user. So I stringify the new user. And then we must attach this to another key. And Ricardo did mention it earlier. He looked at responses on the network tab. He looked at responses. So this was the response, right? But he mentioned there's some other parts that we can send across in these requests. Does anyone know where we would send our post data, in what part of the request? So we're making a post request, that's our method, but where are we storing this new user data? We store it inside the body of the request. Yeah? So our body contains the stringified object that we want to send across. And there's one other thing that we should put in there just to make sure that, yeah, I guess that our backend can handle it and it just gets transferred nicely across the network. And it would be good to put a content type header in there. So you can define headers as well inside of your options object. And the headers again are an object, and the specific thing we're looking for is the content type. And there's a few of them, like application text, application JSON, and in this case we want an application Let me just double check the format of it. So application JSON like that, and this is trying to not pass it as a string, so make sure that is a string. Yep, I think that's all right. Cool. So in other words, to do a post request, we need at the minimum 3 extra bits of data, yeah, or 3 extra options inside of our fetch. We need to specify the method, in this case post. We need to specify what data we want to post, what data we want to send to the backend. And we just want to say what type of data also that we're sending across. And we can do that by using a header with the content type, and in this case application.json. So this will be the most common one you'll see, application.json, or application/JSON. Okay, where do I put these options now I've created them? So I put it in the fetch, and it's the second parameter inside my fetch, and I can just write options in this case. So you might not see it like that. You might see all of this in there like that. Often you'll see it just written like that, yeah? And if you want to do it like that, that's your choice. But if you have lots of options being sent, I like to just put that in a separate variable. And then all of my fetch requests are essentially going to look very, very similar. Yeah, they're all going to have an endpoint and the options will just change based on what method I'm using. Okay. Any questions on that? Method, body, and a content type. So the content type goes inside the headers. Yeah, so it's just those 3 things there in my options. There are others, absolutely, but as a minimum, that's what I'd recommend. So hopefully now when we make that request to REST store user, that is going to send across our request, and inside of the body is going to be this JavaScript object that we want to add into our list of data. Alright, let's go on the back end and see if we can actually handle that then. There's my route, there's my route, just check it's the same. In the server, REST store user, is that what we had? Yeah, great minds think alike, Max, or you saw it earlier, I don't know, but you saw it earlier, okay. Let's see if we can just get rid of these warnings, and then it should give us some output in the terminal as well, just so I can show you one thing. App.js 18.9. Yeah, alright. Let's do that one. Error is sign of value, but no, post user sign never used. Yeah, to get rid of the post user one, let's just set up a button so that when we click the button, it posts it, right? Let's have at the top of the return. Let's just put a button here for now. Quick little recap. How would I assign an on-click event to this button? So inside of the button tag, yeah, I can do an on-click. First though, let's put my fragment so I'm not going to get any other errors. Okay, on-click with a capital K. That equals some curly braces and then what? Arrow function. What goes inside my arrow function? I want to call this method, or this function here. So just invoke the function, post user, singular. Oh, and I've lost my end of my curly for some reason. Cool. And the last little thing, I haven't used the error anywhere. Alright, let's just stick that inside another div. And I could do something like it's weird, but let's just do that for now. So if we got an error, it will display it. Otherwise, it will just put false, which won't actually be displayed anywhere at all. Package.json, I'm not quite sure what that's going on about, to be honest. Something to do with Microsoft schema. But now we've got this, which is what I wanted. Excellent. So when that function gets called, post user, it will set the user. I could have defined that outside, really. Let's define that outside, otherwise it would be redefining that each time. Okay, so it sets our options each time, which, okay, that's fine. And then it will make a fetch request to this endpoint. Then what happens? So then we jump over to the server. It finds app.post. Yeah, notice that this is post. So this will only handle post requests. If it was app.get, our post request wouldn't find an endpoint and nothing would happen. So it must be app.post if you're sending a post request. Then, for now, I just want to check that it's got there. So I just want to log to the console the body part of the request. Why the body? Well, that's where we stored our object, right? In the body of the request, we stringified the user. We stringified that data. Stringify, yep. So I just want to make sure that that is there. Okay. Let's go back and check my app's still running. And let's just go back to the front end. I didn't give my button any text, which is a really clever thing to do. If you create a button, please give it some text so you can actually click on it. So in users, we had a button, and let's actually give it some text, and then we can click post data. Right. Oh, I've got lots of them. I didn't mean to put it there, but obviously I've put it in the wrong place. Never mind. We've got a button. If I click on it, it should invoke that function. Something happened. Was it store user? So there's no response from the store user, but we've at least seen that it's gone there. And all it should do at the moment is log something out to the console. And there it is. So why does it appear there and not on the browser? Because this is the back end, right? So this is the back end console. Whereas the console that you're aware of in the browser is the front end console, right? It's not going to be there. Each time this, yeah, okay. Because that would only be the console.log code that we write on the front end. Console.log code we write on the back end is going to appear in our running app. And that's why we see printed here that definitely that information got to the back end. I could print out the whole request, see what it contains if you're curious. We can click the button again and it should show the whole request object down here. It probably won't be very readable, but let's give it a go. Just go back on the network tab. So we've got the second store user, so it's definitely invoked it. There's no response, but Ah, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. So because we're using that, I think it's just showing the request as the bit of information that we're interested in. So yeah, don't worry about that too much then. But we do need to access the request.body in general. Okay, so how can I append that data to my use data array and return everything back to the front end so that in here under my random users, oh, what happened there? That was weird. So in here under my random users, when I scroll down, I see these 4 names plus Chewbacca. How can I do that? So it's this store user function that we need to edit. Anyone have any ideas?
We'll create an object and then push that object to the user.
Create an object. Well, we've already got the object, haven't we? We've got the Chewbacca object here, and we've already got an array containing lots of other objects. So I just want to add one single object inside of the existing array. That's all I want to do.
So we've got push it.
You could use push, absolutely. So what am I pushing it into then?
Use the data
Use
function.
data function. So what? Use data dot push. What do you mean? You're close. You're really close.
You have to invoke it.
Yeah. So invoke it. That will return an array, and then we push the new object inside of there. And where did I say that new object was? It's stored inside of the, not the res.body, the request. So the request is incoming from the front end to the back end, and res is the response, in this case, from the back end to the front end. Yeah. So it's in the request.body. It's inside of the post request, and let's just store that in a variable for now. So let updated users equals that. And then how do I send that back to the front end? Yep, so the response, what I want to send back, dot send. I want to send it. And then inside, just write updated users. Okay, now that should have a response, which we can check in the network tab. I've got this proxy request again, which to me seems to suggest that possibly my backend has crashed, and that's why we got that weird error before as well. So we'll try it, and if it doesn't work, I'll have to kill and restart the servers again. In fact, that's a good thing to do anyway, because you used node mon, didn't you? But which should automatically reboot. And did I have that installed? No, I'm just using node. So yeah, I'm going to need to either install that, which would be a good practice, or I can just for now kill and start it again. That's not a problem. All right. Okay, so this was our old data for users. On post, I want to send Chewy to the back end, update the data, and then send all 5 users back to the front end to be displayed. That's what should happen. Fingers crossed, right? I'm just going to put the network tab on again, just so that we can see that the request goes through. Hit the post data. I've got some red, I don't like that. So yeah, I think I know what it is. Does it give us any clue? Invalid status code, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, alright. Let's... firstly, let's see exactly what updated users looks like. then we might want to convert it to JSON as well, but let's just see what it looks like first. Maybe I need to kill my server. Maybe. Okay. Fully expect the error, but it's not the most helpful error in the world, is it? Just to break it down into little steps, let's let the old users be that. Let's let the new user be that. And then let's let the updated users be the combination of both, which is the old users and the new user. Cool. And then send the updated users, which is an array. Do we need to do it there? I didn't think we did. See what happens now. Got a lot of these. Okay, no errors now, which is a good thing. And I can clearly see that there's 5 of them. Are they all displayed? He's down the bottom. Nice. So let me just see what it was that was causing the problem. So let's try it without stringifying it and see whether that was the thing that was causing the problem. Nope, so I didn't mind that. Just open the network tab again. Let's say I didn't think we had to do that. Network. Let's post again. Yep, so that works. So therefore, it could have been us using the push methods. But let's try that again as well. So we'll just ignore those 2 variables, and we did user data invoke dot push, and we pushed the rec dot body onto it. Yeah. kill it, start it. Now you see why Node Mon's so useful. Okay, so open the network tab. Yeah, so it did not like that method. Objects not valid as React child. So yeah, something's going on with that way. As I say, I wouldn't do it that way. I'm struggling to work out exactly why that isn't working, but ideally, just create a new container of the data type that you want, and then use this 3 dots to spread your old data, and then inside that same container, inside that same list array, you could also, I mean look, I could probably put rec body directly. I don't think that should be a problem. And there's only one user in there, so that should be fine. I shouldn't need to spread that, but let's have a look again. Last thing, and then we'll take some questions. Yep, so that one also worked, and Chewy's down the bottom there. Yeah, so that is the way I would recommend to post things, or to rewrite the whole of the store. Yeah, as you create a new array, stick the old array inside, spread out, plus any new elements afterwards. I think Lisa's asleep. Is anyone else asleep? Any questions on what we've done today, guys? So, as a recap, to modify fetch to do a post request, or any others, right? Again, this could be, what others could we put in here rather than post? Yeah, we could put get, but we don't really need to, do we, for a get request? That's the default. But we could put a put request in there, or delete are the most common ones. I'm not 100% sure whether fetch supports patch. You might need to do it another way, but yeah, it's worth a Google, I guess. I can't find an obvious answer to that, can I? I'd have to check for you, but yeah, it's worth a try, I guess, and if it doesn't work, you know why. It's a useful one, I just wasn't sure whether fetch supported it out of the box. Certainly something like Axios would, so some people prefer using another library to handle fetch requests, and Axios is the favourite amongst a lot of people. Is that even what I wanted to look at, or is that a different? I think that's probably a different product.
I have a question now. So when you set the data, you put it into the body.
Yep.
Anywhere else to put it? So if I send that to the database, I still put it in the body and then send it across.
So you can put it in the body, or you can put it directly in the URL. So if YouTube's, I think, a good example. When you click, oh, I'm gonna get the sound as well. When you have things like this with a query, the question mark and then v equals blah blah blah. So that data there is being sent directly in the URL. Yeah, so you can send data directly like that, but typically you would send it in the body. It can still be easily inspected, as you probably saw, via the network tab, but it's not quite as public. Yeah, it's not just on display for everyone to see. It doesn't say Chewbacca in the header and sorry, in the URL there. At least if you put it in the body, then it's a little bit hidden, but there's obviously other things you need to do to secure it. Yeah, it's just the standard place to put it. Yeah, it makes sense to, if you've got any sizable data, to put it inside of the body. You can create new requests. A request is just an object, so you can use the new constructor and create, it must be like that, right? You can do that. Create a new request, and inside of the request can take a lot more options. However, anything you put inside of a fetch automatically becomes a request, but that's all it's doing. It's creating a new request data type. Scroll down, yeah. So to the JSX or app.posts. App.post. So the whole thing from there is the post, the function post user. What did you mean? Oh, you meant in the server. Sorry, yeah. App.post. Yep. So we should be able to. Well, we did it, didn't we? We did that. That's all you need to do, really. Yeah. So create an array of your old data plus your new data, and then send it back to the front end. Just as before, all you did was invoke the function and send it on the GET request, yeah? We just had to do this one extra step because we were adding some additional data from the front end. After we've added it, send it back. Of course, this step in here could be connect to a database and just send that request.body onto the database instead. And that's how this was previously set up. Oh, in fact, you can see below the sort of code you'd need for that. Yeah, database.connect. Then, with the database object, inside the collection users, insert the new user. Yeah, and that would update the database there. Of course, you need a database connect function, right? We haven't written that yet, but if you had that, that would connect to your database instance, and then that is all you need to do to update your database as well. And that is using patch rather than post. So patch therefore wouldn't overwrite your whole database. It would just make sure that it added, well, in fact insert one's doing that, so you don't really have to worry, but yeah, patch is making it clear to the user of your API that you're just adding one new user there. You're patching the existing data, you're not posting a whole new set of data. Three dots are doing, yep. So, yeah, okay. Let's. Yeah, I was just going to do a visual example. So, Ricardo loves his fruits, right? Let's have some fruits. We had an apple and banana, right? That'll do for now. And maybe let's have some exotic ones, right? Exotic fruits. Give me some exotic fruits. Papaya. Papaya, yeah. Mangoes as well. Does it have an E, mangoes?
Passion fruit.
Passion fruit. Oh, yeah. Passion fruit. What did you say, Lisa? Starfruit. Jackfruit. What's jackfruit? No, it's too exotic for me. What's that? A yellow sweet fruit. Okay, I'm going to have to Google that in a second. I feel mangoes is spelt wrong. Has it got an E in, yeah? Okay, anyway. Then we want all of the fruits together. You could use something like fruits.concat, yeah, to concatenate both of them and then put the exotic fruits in. However, there's another way of doing it. If you had just create a new array instance, if you put ... in front of an object or an array, or a variable that contains an object or an array, what it does is it spreads. So the 3 dots is a spread operator in this case, and it will take each element and put it into the new array. So it will spread out apple and banana effectively into that. And then it will take it and stick it inside the new array. That's what it's done. And then the dot 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 on exotic fruits would do the same thing. It would spread out each element inside the array. So it's effectively taken them one by one, taking that and putting it inside there. Yeah, so that's what it's doing. It's spreading out each element in an array. And if we'd done that, you see, oh, hold on, let's go back one more step. So if we didn't have the 3 dots, we'd end up with a nested array. Yeah, because that's an array, we'd end up with an array inside of an array. So I need to spread out each element so that my array is just one level deep and contains all of the elements that I was interested in. The old data plus the new user.
So it's creating new array.
Well, it creates a new array because I've put them inside of a new array, right? I've actually written an array instance there. But you could have done the same thing with a set. Yeah, you could have done new set. Oh. So a set's a different data type. Yeah, so that would also work. It just needs some sort of container to be spread into. I chose an array because an array makes sense. It doesn't have to be an array.
Can we use the concat as well?
Can you use the
Updated users.
update? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, updated users becomes an array, so we could, if you wanted to combine exotic fruits with updated users, why not? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's an array or an object to begin with, you can spread it. You can only spread objects into an object, and only spread arrays into an array. Huh?
Talking about the let update users equals, I mean, we have used the spread operator on user data.
Yeah.
And connecting the request required body. So on that case,
Yeah.
we can use the concat as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you could. Just this is the modern way of doing it, and I think this is less error prone for some reasons, but I can't think of why off the top of my head. So this would be a best practice, I think, to do it this way now in modern JavaScript.
I have a question.
Hey, yep, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, because I noticed Ricardo was using it as well yesterday. What is the rest inside the URL?
What is REST here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's not needed. It's really just an indication to the user of your API or other developers that you're trying to create a RESTful API. So there are various ways of creating APIs, and if you looked up RESTful, then that is not the definition you get there, but what is REST? Learn to create timeless REST APIs. Yeah, so it's a design principle for building APIs. Yeah, you don't have to build them using the REST principle, but it's by far the most common and popular method now. Before that, you had SOAP as well. I have to put API after it, right? Otherwise, I just get SOAP. Yep, so SOAP versus REST. Look at two different API styles, and then modern methods. We're looking at GraphQL-based APIs. Yeah, well, GraphQL is more the query language, but it has its own sort of design principles as well. So they would be at least the two you need to be aware of if you're working with APIs a lot, would be REST and the GraphQL one. SOAP, maybe in some old, really large scale APIs and databases, that's still used quite a bit, but yeah, that's all we're doing. We're just saying we're trying to obey the principles of REST when we're creating this API, so therefore we are using, let me go back, we're using a route that includes REST. But that's it really, yeah?
So what if you got rid of the word rest?
No problem.
How would it?
No difference. What one are we using? That one and that one. However, if you change it there, just make sure, of course, that you change it here as well. Yeah, because the endpoints must match. Where's my other one? There it is. And I can prove that to you if you want. Let me kill and start the server again. So it's still obviously retrieved our old user data, and if I click the button, it doesn't work, but that might be because I've been messing around with the other endpoint. But hopefully you get that the rest didn't make a difference because the first one still worked. The get user data still worked without the rest. And users. So we've got store user, we've got store user. That's store user. Should have worked, right? Cannot delete store user. Why is it trying to delete? Oh, we did a lot, didn't we? I was going to go back to the point it was working. But that was definitely working. I don't know what's going on now with my host. Yeah, anyway, shouldn't make a difference as far as I'm aware, so I guess I could just change it back and see if it works, but it shouldn't do, yeah? Yeah, so there's something else going on, I can't see what it is at the moment, but we've chopped and changed quite a bit. Yeah, so use whatever endpoints you want. You can name them, just make them semantic again, and it's all good. Any other questions? Cool. I will stop it there.